Hello and welcome to episode 205 of Page One, the Writers Podcast. I'm Tarek.
I'm Marco, and thanks for joining us on the podcast, where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, find out how they got into the industry and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. And as ever, I will say that we have a great back catalogue of guests, because we do. I'm not lying.
No, it never changes. It's
exactly. The back catalogue is there. It's there. It doesn't change. And we have had some surprisingly brilliant guests on this podcast. I say surprising because why do they want to speak to us?
I think it's a mistake. Yeah,
it is a mistake. But
reliable who we are when we book them.
Exactly. But so please do check that out if you haven't before. We've got authors, we've got screenwriters, we've got comic writers, video game writers, comedians, journalists. So there's a whole array of different types of writers, as well as industry folk like agents and editors and things like that. So if you're an aspiring writer, then there is a plethora of things there that could be helpful. So please do check that out. But this week we had a crime guest last week with Harry Fisher, and we're staying on the criminal theme this week.
We're chatting with the wonderful Graham Bartlett, who is a really interesting, I know we say interesting a lot about our authors, but he is genuinely very interesting. Death Comes Knocking was his first novel, and it was a factual book with Mr. Peter James, previous guest of the podcast.
Former guest of the podcast, yeah.
Huge crime author, and Graham is a former detective himself, so he was taking his kind of cop knowledge and applying it to real life stories and cases. But then he turned to writing fiction himself with the Joe Hill book series. Bad for Good was the first one, and the latest is City on Fire, which is out March this year. But not just content with writing crime books himself as an ex-cop, he also has a really fantastic service he runs where he kind of advises authors, TV writers, etc., about how the police works, how forensics works, how cases are actually investigated to make sure that kind of authentic feel is carried over in people's writing. Very interesting.
Yeah, and I think, all of the top, we mentioned Peter James already, who is one of the top UK crime authors, but, many British and I think growing international authors also will consult him about the proper procedures and things. And he's actually, as he tells us on the podcast, he's built up a little team of experts as well. So if it's an area that he's not sure about, then he's got people he can consult as well. So, I think whether you're aspiring and just writing your first novel, or whether you're already well established, his service seems to be very useful. And as you say in the podcast to him, it was spoiler. It's surprising that no one else has done this before, because it is obviously an important aspect.
Folk hate it when you get stuff, when they read things which are inaccurate, and sometimes it's just hard to do the research, to have to talk to a cop or a detective or a forensic scientist or whatever. But to have a one-stop shop where they can go to him and say, read my manuscript, what am I getting wrong? What am I getting right? It's a great service. And we also ask him about his most accurate and most inaccurate TV shows. So we'll find out what his answers are, have a listen.
Yes, indeed. And they're potentially controversial, I think. But yeah, no, it's definitely worth listening to that. Before we get into the interview, I just wanted to mention, listeners will hopefully have seen that we've had a bonus episode this week of a new short, sort of punchy podcast that we're calling Drafting Notes for now. I don't know if that name will stick, but it's going to be a Patreon exclusive, at least for a few months before we start releasing them. But for that first episode, we've released it, and it's just Tarek and I. We want to just talk about one single aspect of writing, or that's either in the news or that's we're thinking about, and just sort of get into the meat of that for 10-15 minutes and talk about that. So please do check that out if you haven't already. But for now, let's get into the interview, and we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat.
On with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together?
What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realise it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
I normally start with the question, did you always want to be a writer? But obviously you have had quite a serious career elsewhere before you turned to writing. I mean, you were a policeman, you were chief inspector. How did you go from that to becoming a writer?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, quite a serious career. I was, I was a police officer for 30 years. My last job was I was the chief of police for Brighton, Hove. I was the chief superintendent of Brighton, Hove. And at the point I retired from the police, I had no notion at all of being a writer. It hadn't entered any of my plans. It wasn't I didn't have this burning desire that so many people have, and I wish I did have, because I probably would have found the joy of it earlier. Until I kind of started talking with a chap by the name of Peter James, who I'm sure many listeners
might have podcast guest, in fact.
Oh, is he? Yeah, right, okay. I have to listen to that one. See if he's nice about me on it. So I was advising Peter around the time on his Roy Grace novels. I got to know Peter through his association with Sussex Police, and he. There is a long story. I'll give you the short story. Basically, he saw some of my writing. And because I wrote some blogs and stuff like that, nothing, no books or anything. And he said, you've got quite a reasonable writing style that I think I can develop. Do you fancy writing non-fiction with me? Because my readers are always asking me to write a non-fiction of the real stories that inspired the Roy Grace novels. And I kind of said, well, you will, if you help me on the way, I'll give it a go, but no promises. True to his word, he was a brilliant mentor. He taught me how to develop my writing style from a very kind of organisational policing writing style, whether that's writing statements or writing reports or whatever, into a commercial writing style. And we published a book called Death Comes Knocking, Policing Roy Grace's Brighton in 2016, and that became a Sunday Times top 10 bestseller. And then we wrote another non-fiction on a single case called Babes in the Wood, which was a 30-year struggle for justice around 2 child murders. And then from that, I thought, I'll give fiction a go. That must be easy. And found out very quickly that it wasn't easy. But that's how I became a writer. And it was kind of almost, I didn't really, I've never been creative in that sense at all. So to find that I actually had this within me and it just needed bringing out was a joy, and I've loved it ever since.
That's really interesting, because most folk we chat to, they've kind of had that bug in them from a young age. They've always been interested in books and writing and stuff. But I don't think we've ever chatted to someone who kind of almost didn't realise they wanted to be a writer until they were late.
I'm very slow on the uptake, Terry.
But then that Death Comes Knocking book you did with Peter James, that was back in 2016, I think it came out.
That's it.
And
yeah.
Obviously, we'll chat about your other side hustle, which is your consulting agency that you do provide advice to writers. But it sounds like that was the point then when that became a thing. You know, the idea that you could then give advice to writers about crime stuff, did that come up from that point as well? Did that kind of these two new branches of your career?
That's it. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It was all around the same time. And I was advising Peter anyway. And then when we were doing some of the festivals and kind of interviews, we did interviews for Bookseller and such like, you know, Peter started talking about the fact that I help him on his novels and how I help him and that I kind of try and inject the authenticity into the story rather than subsume the story with procedure. And I, from that point on, but other writers were hearing these things and just coming, you know, just approaching me and saying that, could you give us a hand on mine? And it just snowballed really. And now it's practically a full-time job now, well, combined with the writing, practically a full-time job. You know, I think I've worked with about 200 authors over a period of time, many of them returning authors, and at all different levels. You know, some people are just literally just starting to write, starting to think about getting published, and others are household names. So it's an absolute joy, and I've developed a team now that work with me to provide advice on the areas that I'm not an expert in. And you know, the longer I am from being in the police, the more of those areas they are. So I kind of farm a lot of the inquiries out to other people, but yeah, but take on a lot myself too.
It's interesting as well with Peter James, because I do remember when we spoke to him that he said that some of the books that he wrote were as a result of police, I don't know if it was yourself or others, but police coming to him and saying, here's something that I haven't seen covered, or whether it's a specific crime or a type of crime or something, that he would then develop a Roy Grace story about to then turn into a book. So, you know, I hadn't, until we spoke to him, realised that sort of thing would happen going the other way. So I understand people going to police to consult them, but police almost coming to writers and saying, have you thought about this or this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think certainly some of the bigger name authors, I think Ian Rankin does this as well. You know, they develop these networks, and people kind of think, oh, this is a good story, and it's, you know, it is a truism that you know, fact can be stranger than fiction. So, you know, I'm certainly aware of 3 or 4 stories in the Roy Grace series that have got their roots in real crime. I mean, obviously Peter's very sensitive and fictionalizes changes them enough. They're not just a dramatization of someone's tragedy, but they are still inspired by something that happened.
Yeah. And to chat about your service for a little bit, you know, it's a pretty robust service that you offer, because, you know, you go through your website and you have like a manuscript review you can have a one-to-one consultation, you do workshops and courses at times for people. It seems like something which is, and as you're just saying there, you've got a team of people now doing a whole kind of range of areas, and it seems very much like something that's grown over the years to quite a big kind of enterprise almost. I mean, is it something you kind of thought would be as big as it is now when you first started?
No. So, in answer to that question, no. I certainly thought I would just be, you know, helping out the odd author that you know heard of me and wanted a bit of help. But as it developed, you know, people were coming up to me and going, oh, you know, can you help me sort of plan out this series, or, you know, and TV writers as well. You know, I do quite a lot with TV writers as well. So, you know, we've got this idea that we're just developing now. We're you know, hoping to get commissioned, and it just kind of, it just mushroomed. And then when I was starting to get inquiries about things like forensic anthropology, or, you know, the role of mental health in policing and stuff like that, and I'm thinking, oh, hang on, this is all a bit beyond me. Then I was going out and finding people who had the same philosophy around it as I did, which is that, you know, these writers are writing fiction, they're not writing textbooks. So when we're working with them, we will help them, as I said earlier, we will help them kind of inject their stories and their characters with the authenticity, and we won't kind of subsume those. You know, we're not here to kind of create reality, we're here to create authenticity.
Has there ever been a request that has somewhat flummoxed you, that even with all your experience, that you haven't been able to answer adequately?
Most certainly, one that springs to mind is somebody who, she was actually on one of my courses, and she was great on the course, and, you know, she engaged with the exercises and everything. And afterwards, she came to me and she said, I want to write series of based on a space station on Mars, where the policing is partially by Martians and partially by US Marshals on the space station. Can you help? And I had to say, look, I'd love to go to Mars. I'd love to investigate murders on Mars, but I really don't know what. So that was one that sticks in my mind. That I just. She kept sort of coming back and asking, but I really can't help you.
I mean, it seems like something which, it seems it's such an obvious service now that I know it exists, because we've often talked to writers who say, I've got contact in the police, or I've tried to go for a ride along, or I always try to talk to someone, but it seems like everyone has to start from scratch every time with their local police force, etc. So it seems like having a service where anyone can go to for police advice seems like such an obvious service to offer. It seems almost amazing that there's not more of them out there, but it's a really good idea. And I think, especially the industry of crime books, where the readers are real sticklers for inaccuracies and things, the rank of officers, analysing crime scenes, how people talk to each other, terminology, all that kind of stuff, people pick up on, and they know if it's not right or doesn't sound right. I think it's really important to get right, even if it's not the kind of be all and end all of the story, just that kind of background sprinkling of things to make sure that everything works okay.
Yeah, and I think if people can believe the world, they'll believe the outrageous things that can happen in that world. Midsummer, surely no village like in Midsummer has that many murders. Even Brighton in Peter's books and my books doesn't have that many murders. Left, no, exactly. But if you create a world that people can go, okay, well, it could happen because I believe in this world. But you say about the service. I mean, I try to create a kind of one-stop shop really for people. So, if you've seen the experts on there, it does actually go beyond policing. I mean, we've got medical professionals on there that can give advice. Mental health professionals on there. So it's really got journalists on there. So it's really quite broad. And what I like is that people come to us and go, look, don't know who else to ask. Can you help with this? And usually there's either somebody on my panel of experts, or we will know somebody else that we can bring in to help. And and I'm always on the lookout. So the other day I just saw a podcast that a friend of mine's actually just launching, and it involved a recently retired prison officer who was a prison officer in some of the top sort of security prisons in the country. A reformed gang leader who now runs a drugs rehabilitation agency, and a prison mental health nurse. And I thought, well, there's three people that I haven't got already, so I'm having them to say, people, so I'm always on the lookout for those skills gaps that I've got, and also places in other countries as well. I mean, I've got a couple of officers or ex-officers from Police Scotland who do a huge amount of work for me, because the English and Welsh systems are very different from the Scottish systems. So, it would be daft for me to try and advise on the intricacies of a Scottish investigation and the procurator fiscal and that sort of thing, when I've got a couple of people that sat there ready that can help them.
It's funny, isn't it, how it can... Because obviously when writers get this information, the skill is not to put all of that into the book, because that ends up... It can be boring, and it's not needed, but it's to lend that layer of authenticity, they need to just have the right amount. But it's funny how easily it can take you out of it if it isn't accurate, because Tarek is a lawyer, I'm a former lawyer, and when you have court scenes and stuff, when things are being said, even the way they refer to judges in Scotland and things like that, it can just take me out of it entirely. And maybe I am one of these readers that is a stickler, but it sort of annoys me a bit that I've just thought, well, you could have done a bit of research into this. But a lot of people, I think, watch American TV shows, and that is their reference point for a lot of what ends up being written. So I think a service like this is hugely useful to writers, no matter what stage they're at.
Yeah, that's true, and just the Americans. Sorry, just to go on. I can never criticise a writer for not understanding, because there is so many US TV series, and I don't know whether they're right or wrong, but it's trying to know what you don't know, sort of thing, and get get that expertise in, you know, in areas that you might not even think to ask. That's why the manuscript review is such a good service, because I kind of go through the whole thing and, you know, pick up little bits that they might not think to ask otherwise.
Yeah. And well, I was just going to ask, obviously this is your service, and you started out, as you said, by helping Peter with the non-fiction books, but at what stage in your own mind did you think, you know what, I think I can maybe have a crack at something completely fictional?
Yeah, I think it was, so we wrote the second book we wrote, which was Babes in the Wood, was kind of, I mean, that was a one case story right the way through. Mm-hmm. And I was getting more confident in my writing by that point. You know, I was still sending everything to Peter, but, you know, getting less sort of feedback, less kind of developmental feedback, fewer notes from him on that. And I started to kind of think then about, you know, do I want to do more non-fiction, which is quite onerous in terms of, you know, the research, but then stories were starting to sort of pop up in my mind about, you know, they certainly speaking with a lot of novelists, you know, I was kind of, oh yeah, you know, they asked me, don't you ever get that what if moment? And that's kind of what, you know, well, what if this happened? What if they did that? What if they, and that's what started it really. That was a sort of germination of my fiction career. And then I had a conversation with the chap that took over from me in Brighton. And I left just kind of in the middle of, or just as the cuts were really starting to bite. And so I was kind of, you know, I was moaning about the amount of staff we were losing, and, you know, the lack of money we had to do this, that and the other. And then I had a chat with my successor there, and he said, if I'd had what you had and were moaning about sort of 3 or 4 years ago, I would bite your hand off now. He said, yeah. You've got no idea how hard it is to keep the city safe. I've got, you know, literally, I don't know, you know, that every cupboard is bare. So that just got me thinking about, what if things got so bad and the police were so denuded that the public turned to vigilantism, and there was kind of almost like this dual sort of police function that was carried out by organised criminals who would literally just take people off the street and banish them in vigilante prisons and execute them. And, you know, what would that look like? And that's where my debut novel Bad for Good came from, and so it sort of developed that you know, I was taking as is and just trying to stretch it to a plausible but also quite extensive kind of extreme, really.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a kind of a much lighter, more grounded, like dark Black Mirror type idea of taking that kind of a concept and then running it right the way down the road to how would that look like in the real world type thing, you know.
Yeah.
And when you were writing Bad for Good, the first book in the Joe Howie series, what was that like? How did you find writing that? You know, this is the first book you've written without a co-author, and your first time writing a fiction novel as well. So what was that process like?
Yeah, I was quite chaotic, if I'm honest, about in my writing style with that. I think before I'd always had this responsibility to Peter to kind of, you know, Peter would go, you know, get me the next 3 chapters by such and such a date or whatever. Mm-hmm. When I was writing, you know, obviously, as you said, it's completely on my own. So I would just, you know, I started writing it, and then I would get to sort of 10,000 words, and then I would go back and I would start editing those 10,000 words, and then get to 12,000 and go back, and I never really got off the blocks. And it was interesting because I was working with Dorothy Coomson, who's a writer that many people will know. I was advising her on one of her books, and she was, I remember having a conversation with her, and she said, well, how's your own writing going? And so I'm at, you know, 15,000 words now, and, you know, I'm kind of, you know, I think I'm okay. I'm sort of, you know, getting there. I'm, you know, doing 1,000 words a day, etc. And then a couple of months later, she said, oh, you know, how's your writing going now? And I said, great, you know, I'm on 12,000 words now, and I'm doing. She went, well, hang on a minute. Now, and you know, she kind of really, she said, right, okay. She said, we'll finish my consultation now, and then I'm going to give you some advice about writing. And it was all, and she got me into a far more disciplined writing style. But and then I did it. Then I, I got that. That book was a venture. It took me about 7 years to write in the end, but for the next one in the series, Force of Hate, I happened to have just done a John York story, Force, which is on structure, 5-act structure, and the roles, protagonist, antagonist, wants versus needs, all that kind of stuff. And I actually planned that one to a reasonable degree. I didn't, not scene by scene, but I kind of actually planned it according to the structure, and then adopted Dorothy's advice, which was just write it, just write the first draft, get it finished, and then you can start editing it because you know what you're editing towards.
Yeah,
and that seemed to work, and that's now my style. But yeah, Bad for Good was just, I never thought I'd finish it, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it can be very difficult, can't it, when you're first doing that first novel. It is about finding out what works for you and what doesn't work for you as a writer, I think, anyway. But it sounds now like you've found something that does work for you, which involves planning, because often we ask writers on here, are you a planner or a pantser? But you like to have some sort of structure to aim for when you're writing then.
Yeah, and it is just a structure. It's kind of, I use the 5-act structure. I know where all the plot points have to come and what's likely to happen there, but I don't do it. I don't do it scene by scene. There's a friend of mine called Leslie Thompson, who's based in near Brighton. She's a crime writer, and she has spreadsheets for every scene and post-it notes and also really a real planner. And I think Joe Callahan as well, who I don't think I've got her on here, Joe, who's won loads of awards with her brilliant book, Billingham and I. She's a real sort of intense planner. And it's not, and it's also, of course,
yeah, absolutely.
I like to know the roadmap, and then I'll decide which roads I'm going to take to get to the various waypoints. That's how I kind of work it. Works for me.
And so once you'd written Bad for Good and you were kind of happy with the edit, etc., what was your next step then in terms of getting out there? Did you go down the kind of classic route of finding an agent, or did you approach people directly? What was your route?
Did having writing contacts help with that process?
Yeah, oh, definitely, and I had an agent. I shared an agent with Peter for our non-fiction, okay. And we agreed that when I was, after a while of writing my fiction, that I was probably better going to a different agent. So because of her workload and the various issues that were going on. So it's a very amicable split. But because of my writing contacts, I was able to get a shortcut through to David Headley, who is my agent now, and went for coffee with David and kind of talked him through, the fact that I'd just left my agent and, I've got this book and I've got a plan for a second book and possibly a third one at the end. Would you want to take a look? And he said, yeah, by all means. And I didn't realise he'd read my non-fictions. I didn't realise he'd read my non-fictions. He knew I could write. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Certainly in the first one with a lot of help from Peter. And then he within a couple of, probably a week or so, he said, I'll take you on. I'm really excited about it. So I've been with David ever since. And, people that know David will know that he's an incredibly busy but energetic agent. He's got a great eye for business and for the industry because he's a bookseller as well. So he knows the kind of trend he goes for books. He's a legend to have on your side. So I was very, very lucky. But I do, I also know very much that, there was a lot of contacts in place that allowed me that shortcut.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is he quite an editorial agent in terms of, suggesting changes and things like that?
Yeah, he is on first. So the first novel he is, less so on the I don't know about I'm supposed to say that I will anyway, but less so on subsequent novels because within contract, because his view is actually it's the publisher's job to do the deep edit. Yeah. But he reads everything. And he will come back and go, on all of them, he's come back and go, well, not sure that quite works, or can you do a little bit more there, or can this be slightly, resequenced, or so there's always something. But the heavy edit that he does is usually on the one that you're going to go out on submission for.
And your latest book is City on Fire, which is just out in paperback, time of recording, and or sorry, not time, time of episode going out. I've totally mucked up. We had a whole chat about how to phrase this, and I've totally mucked up.
We're going to be so professional around that, aren't we? It's just out. It's just out.
Just out. There we go. That's how to phrase it. So this is the third book in your Joe Howie series. So why don't you tell us a little bit about City on Fire?
So City on Fire is so Joe Howe, who is the divisional commander of Brighton Hove, has just suffered a bereavement. Her sister has just died of a drugs overdose in the city, and Joe is racked with guilt because as police commander she feels that she should have done something about it. So she creates this initiative called Operation Eradicate, which the whole idea is getting hordes of drug users into treatment and clamping down on the drug dealers. What she doesn't bank on is that a big pharmaceutical company run by Sir Ben Parsons actually needs all the drug users in Brighton because they're just about to trial a new opiate substitute, and he's not having any of this. So he employs murderous organised crime techniques and contacts, corruption at the highest level to bring down Joe and destroy everything that destroy her and everything that she stands for. And her battle is about holding that line and taking the fight to Sir Ben.
Brilliant. And when you're writing a series of books like this, obviously you started out with the first one, which, as we heard, a bit of, I guess, trial and error. It took a long time to get there. But did you always have future ideas for Joe, or is it something you just develop book by book?
Yeah, no, I always had an idea of where I wanted them to go. I mean, Joe does the same job that I used to do in the same city that I used to do it. So the things that she experiences, whilst they're kind of dialed up to Maxwell's 10, are the same sorts of thing. The political pressures, the tacit, sometimes overt corruption that's kind of coming in and hitting you from all angles. That's the sort of thing that I was dealing with. So it's a Bad for Good was always going to be about what happens when the police cuts are bad, that vigilantism takes over. Force of Hate, I wanted to write something that included far right extremism, people trafficking, and euthanasia and care homes. I wanted to, I wanted that, and then I always wanted to write something about drugs and homelessness, which was where City on Fire came from, because actually City on Fire is based on a real operation that I ran for a number of years in Brighton to do exactly the same as what Joe's trying to do, which is trying to get hordes of drug users into treatment to divert them from crime and dry up the market for the dealers.
I mean, it sounds like is that quite a nice process for you in terms of idea generation? Going back into your past and your career into like topics or cases and just picking bits and pieces here and there, or ideas that you may have had and using them in your books.
Yeah, no, it is, and there's always, there's always more stuff to draw on. But one of the reasons why I wanted to write Joe as the main character, so somebody at a very senior level, because I've always been a very big reader, and I was fed up with seeing senior officers being sort of painted as career hungry, narcissistic,
corrupt,
bullying, operationally. Operating competent, corrupt individual. And I thought, well, I was from the senior officers. I none of those things. I got none of those things. I'm sure someone told me I was. But I knew that the day-to-day and the longer-term pressures that I was under, to kind of shield the front line from the malignant effects of poor leadership in the police, poor leadership in politics, and poor leadership in commerce were as dramatic as any murder inquiry. I mean, there are murders obviously in mine, and in fact, Bad for Good is a bit of a whodunit as well. But that pressure, that kind of trying to hold that line, and being true to yourself, and batting off the malign influences, and keeping the front line kind of going. I just thought, well, that was my job, that was my experience, my day job. So why not write about it? And there's lots of themes that kind of illustrate that tension. And I'm sure there's even more nowadays, but certainly from my days, I haven't written them, but I've probably got about 5 or 6 others that I could draw on.
Yeah,
I mean, it's true actually, isn't it, that often your police protagonist is down on their luck
alcoholic
detective or something like that, and you never really see it from the top level in these stories. Certainly not in a complimentary way, I guess.
Yeah,
I guess
except
as
get
you're
pulled
saying.
into the office and get shouted at for 10 minutes straight about mucking up the case. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And is there anything? Obviously, you've got this vast experience that you're able to draw on for your novels, but is there anything, whether because it's too one of these things that's stranger than fiction that people just wouldn't believe, or because there are just some things that you just wouldn't write about that you've experienced in your books that you have there, but you just decide I can't write about that?
Mm. I mean, I did a lot of work around child protection, child safeguarding, that sort of thing. I did it both as a detective constable, or right the way through from detective constable to being the head of child protection and public protection for the force. And the stuff that I've seen, I've come across, I'm aware of, and some of the effects on children and families and my staff would mean that I would never go there in any detail at all. I'll refer to it, and that might be in people's backstories that they're paedophiles or whatever, but I would never write that in any detail at all. I'd also never. It's probably an obvious one, this, but I'd never breach any kind of operational sensitivity. So in City on Fire, there's quite a heavy undercover policing. The reason I'm hesitating, I don't want any spoilers of that. It's quite heavy undercover policing strand in the first part of the book, and I'm really cautious around how I depict that, particularly with some of the technologies. I've invented some technologies that aren't what usually happens, and I'm running past serving and recently retired undercover officers to make sure that I've fudged it enough that it's not going to compromise any operations. I'm sure no one reads my books to see how they're going to break down the National Crime Agency or anything like that. But it's just a responsibility I feel towards serving officers.
I mean, I have to say, I did have the thought when I was looking through your consultancy agency. I was like, if I was a criminal, perhaps I would come to you and almost like make up this whole story about how I'm writing this book about robbing a bank, and how did my character get away with it? What would you advise? How would they not get caught? I mean, it does seem like a kind of like a if in a sick world you could have someone going in that method,
making ill use of it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
I do get some inquiries that make me think sometimes. You sure
you're not a writer? And I mean, given who you are and your background, I'd also wondered, does anyone ever write into you to say, I think you might have got this wrong. This you made a mistake in your police force set up here, and you think, no, it's absolutely you're the one who's wrong.
What, in my own writing?
Yeah,
in my own writing, they haven't, but I kind of predicted it, because at the beginning of all of my books, just before the title page or before the first, there's a disclaimer in there to say, I spend a lot of my time telling writers how to make policing authentic, but sometimes you need to go in. And so I could always point to that. I mean, for example, in Bound for Good and Throughout, I have basically merged all of the Southeast England forces in some of their functions. Now, at the moment, Surrey and Sussex share a lot of their murder squads and their roads policing and their technical units and that sort of thing. I expanded that to be Southeast because I wanted the cuts to look even worse than they were. So things like that. I mean, I'll never get ranks wrong, obviously, because that was my life. I mostly no. In fact, I will never get an officer to do something that is rank inappropriate unless there's a particular reason for it. So if I want to put a detective inspector in an interview, which never happens, I'll always find a reason to do it. Even if it's something like that detective inspector says, sod you lot, I'm going to go in an interview because I can do better than you. You know, that kind of thing, just to give the nod to it. But I have got this kind of get out of jail free card at the beginning of all my books, in case something slips through.
Yeah, that's a good idea, I think, definitely. And so looking forward, obviously City on Fire out now, but are there more Joe Howe novels in the pipeline?
I'm not writing any Joe Howe at the moment, because I just want to. It's a bit of an exercise for me, really. Joe Howe is taking writing what you know to ridiculous extreme, because she's doing the job I did it. So I've actually, sitting with my agent at the moment, I've just written the first in what I hope will be a 3-part series, an international organised crime thriller told from the perspective of a gang member in an organised crime group. You know, that's partly to sort of get out of the comfort zone, but also to kind of explore that world, which I couldn't really do in the police procedural.
Yeah. How did you find that process as well, sort of getting out of your comfort zone? Was it difficult at first, or was it good to do something fresh and new?
Yeah, I mean, because I had a very clear idea about doing just that. I kind of planned a little bit more about, you know, where my points of view would come from and such like. But it was, you know, sometimes I would, you know, I'd find myself sort of drifting into, you know, a pursuit. There's not a lot of police in mine at all, hardly any. But I would find myself drifting into, you know, that familiar territory around, you know, policing or trying to get things too accurate and such like. But I think I got through it all right. I mean, it was certainly a joy. I really enjoyed, you know, just stretching myself and just, you know, and kind of thinking about how all these kind of people actually think and work and talk and interact, and when loyalties are or aren't, and all those sorts of things. It was a great exercise, and, you know, hopefully it'll, you know, be out there for readers at some stage.
Yeah, excellent.
And that's 4 books you've written, 4 fiction books you've written now. How do you find the process, having written your 4th book, compared to when you first started off? Is it much easier? I think we were chatting to someone over the weekend who said that with each book it got harder. I can't remember who it was who was saying that, but they're saying as you go on, each book gets harder because you're trying to kind of do better.
I think it was
trying to top yourself.
I think it was Mark Billingham that said that. Yeah.
That's what it was.
Every book.
He seems to have nailed it, though, isn't he?
Yes. Well, that's it. I think his point was that he sort of struggled with this. That every book was harder, but then someone pointed out to him that it should be, because you're trying to write a better book. Every book, whether you might not succeed, but your aim is always to write. Your next book is going to be your best book.
And just write the same thing every time, type thing. So have you found it harder or easier? I suppose some sense it gets easier because you kind of, you know, things like they're going to hit that wall, you're going to feel a bit crap, there's going to be lulls and stuff. But I guess another parts of it do get harder. But what's your experience been?
Yeah, no, I mean it's certainly harder, but I'm more confident that I know why it's harder and what to do about it. So, you know, I try and write quite sort of pacey action work. So, you know, I want that, you know, I want the pace to be, you know, even pacier. I want the characters to be even deeper, you know, more dimensional. You know, I want the conflict to be both more believable and more threatening. And so it's kind of, you know, so I know what I need to do, and the hard bit is actually doing it sometimes. You know, how can I make that scene even more of a page turner, you know, and I mean the way I do it is just you know, I know what I need to do, but I just edit and edit and edit and edit and edit. So I'm not really bothered on first draft. I just want to get the story down, as, you know, Dorothy Coomson told me I should, and then I just go back and back and back and back and back. And my last, so I set this one that I've just been talking about, I sent to David, my agent, and he came back and he had some notes on it, and he said, you know, we also, can you try and get, it was at 99,000 words. He said, can you try and get it down to 90,000 words? Well, you know, I'm not going to do that. But just went through it, and, you know, there were some storylines in there. You just think, well, really go very much. It didn't go very far, so that can go. Or, you know, some characters in there go, they don't really earn their place in the book, so they can go. But some of it as well was just like shaving some of the some of the ancillary kind of detail away from it, and you know, getting in late, coming out early into action scenes, all that sort of thing. And I know what to do. Sometimes the hard bit is actually working out how to do it.
Yeah. It is interesting. Yeah, it's always the dreaded thing when someone says, "Can you cut a significant chunk of words out of this story, but keep it the same story?" But you do. I think the more you edit, you learn certain techniques, like you were talking about there, and you know, there are just certain descriptors and stuff that you realize that you can actually cut quite safely, that don't impact the story, but do make it more pacey and things like that. But you said earlier that you were there was some sort of TV thing in the offing, a proposal or something like that. I mean, is that a world you'd like to get more involved in as well?
Yeah, I mean, I work quite a lot with TV writers. I've worked on what sort of shows would so Annika, which was is actually a Scottish TV with Nicola. I can't think what to say now. Unforgivable is that, but anyway, Annika.
Yeah.
We Hunt Together. The other girl. I can't remember some of the titles, but yeah, I worked on probably a dozen TV shows. Advising on there's one called Little Disasters, which is coming out soon, which by Sarah Vaughan. I worked on the book with Sarah as well. Yeah. So yeah, and it's the same sort of thing. It's just kind of getting into the story, getting into the characters, and just working out how I can make them more authentic. And some of it's, particularly for TV, a lot of it's dialogue. But to be honest, it's just changing dialogue and some of the settings. I mean, some of the howlers that TV writers, for the same reasons as we said earlier, because they US TV or themselves, is having you've got an interview room and you've got a one-way mirror in the interview room, and people are watching from the next. That's never ever happened. I mean, think of the health and safety implications of having glass in an interview room with a violent suspect.
There's actually never a one-way mirror glass in an interview.
No,
that's one of the 101 scenes in an American cop drama.
I know. Oh, I don't know about in America.
Oh, maybe in America, I suppose. But yeah.
Yeah. So what you do is, if you want to remotely monitor an interview, you're watching it on a laptop from a link, from the camera in the corner. So that's how that's done.
That is interesting. I always assumed there was some truth in that.
Well, this is I was talking to a production development assistant on Friday about it, because I sent some notes back because they had that in there. And I said, we need to change this ops room because there isn't an ops room there. It'll be on with the laptop. He phoned me out. He said, "You're joking, aren't you?" I said, "No." But every TV show that I've seen, whatever, I said, "What?
Totally.
Every drama or every sort of final documentary?" Went, "No, I see what you mean." Yeah. But also the uniform PC standing mutely in the corner while the detectives interview, that never happens either. So there's little things like that you pick up in scripts. So it's mainly dialogue.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting.
Excellent.
Would you ever want to try your hand at writing a script yourself, in the same way you kind of went into fiction books?
I would. Yeah, I think that's probably my next stretch that I want to. I'd love to do that. A lot of my writer friends do both, and it just it's a completely different discipline, obviously. But I'd love to give it a go and see how it pans out.
Well, who's the guy who wrote The Responder? Tony. Can't remember his surname now, but he was the BBC drama with Tim
Martin Freeman, isn't it?
Martin Freeman, that's it, yeah. And that was, I think, he was a previous police officer who kind of went to script writing, and I think that show was definitely lauded for being very accurate in terms of the reality of like a guy on the beat, the stress and the kind of the monotony of that.
Does it annoy you when you watch the British cop shows? I'm thinking of something like Line of Duty, which is obviously lauded, and it was lauded at the start. Certainly at the start of Line of Duty, it was lauded as...
Did someone tell you to feed that one in?
No. It was lauded at the start as being very grounded, and then obviously it has got ridiculous in terms of the storyline. Enjoyable to watch, but in terms of... Even I can tell it's not very realistic.
The Morse code finger, the death video or something.
But I mean, how much does it annoy you when you see things like that?
I mean, Jed Mercurio's created a very likeable and engaging drama there. I the accuracy of it could be much better. I think. I think. I'm trying to be so diplomatic here. I think you can still create really, really gripping, intense, addictive TV, and have your scenes and your characters authentic. I don't think Line of Duty does the latter. It obviously does the former in spades, and it's very, very popular. And I wouldn't criticise it at all in that regard. But I think you can have your cake and eat it, and you can make your policing authentic, plausible, credible for your viewers. Because everyone that I speak to says, I love Line of Duty, but obviously it doesn't happen like that, does it? And I go, well, no, it doesn't. But carry on loving Line of Duty.
Yeah, exactly.
I always like the interview scenes in Line of Duty where it's the PowerPoint presentation. They always have the next slide is always the exact
the one they need to
photo they want for the question. Yeah, it's always perfectly lined up. It's amazing. What I mean, if these are all
PowerPoint presentation in an interview on
exactly.
I mean, if Line of Duty is a kind of one end of the scale? What examples do you think there are of films or TVs that shows that do get it right? Then that do show quite an accurate portrayal of what it's like to be a police officer?
The best one is Happy Valley by a country mile.
Okay.
Happy Valley is it's not. I mean, it's not really a detective story, as people will know. The central character is a uniformed sergeant, living and working in this place called Hepton, or near Hepton, what is actually Hepton Bridge in West Yorkshire. But the way that she is, the way that she speaks, the way that her personal and her professional life kind of coexist or don't sometimes is just 100% authentic. I mean, one of my courses I run is called Character and Dialogue, and it's all about getting police officers right and getting them to speaking right. And it's basically now Happy Valley Masterclass, because I use clips from Happy Valley for doing different things, and just the way that she interacts in different circumstances, the way she talks to people, senior officers, junior officers, that sort of thing. It's just fabulous, and they always balance that the story and the fabulous characters, including the villains in it, with the authenticity. It's just brilliant. I mean, there's no accident to that. They in the first two series they used Bob and Carol Bridgestock, who Bob used to be head of murder for West Yorkshire. And he's now a crime writer himself, but Bob and Carol both they run together with R.C. Bridgestock. So they were heavily involved in the development of that program and subsequent, the production of it too. So no accident. So that's the best one by a country mile.
That one does a show that did always feel quite authentic to me. Even the scenes where she's like in the police station, going through, popping her head in someone's office, or someone having to catch in the stairwell. It felt very real. Yeah. What I imagine was very real. Yeah. And the fact she's always got a million things going on at the same time, that's very real. Quite often you get, you'll see police officers depicted, they've only got one, they're only working on one thing at a time. Well, I'd love to have been in that position. It never happened.
What was the last book that you read?
There are a lot. I read so many books at the same time, because I'm reading to people want quotes for the covers, or to manuscript advise, or to or just for my own pleasure. But the last one that I read was a book called Banquet of Beggars by Chris Lloyd, and it's actually historical fiction. It's based in Paris in World War II, and it's basically it's told from the point of view of a French cop who's trying to prevent two people being executed by the Germans for a murder that they haven't committed.
Okay.
And my son lives in Paris, and it just shows this really dark. It's really well researched, really dark, gritty and scary kind of undercurrent of occupied Paris in Second World War.
Nice. That sounds good. Yeah.
What about the last film that you watched?
Oh my god, I'm not a great one for watching movies. You know, I'm a bit you know, because I love my reading so much. I don't watch a lot of don't watch a lot of films, but yeah, so I watch a lot of non-fiction on TV. Yeah, I couldn't really answer that one on films because I'm not great.
Okay,
for movies.
what about TV shows that you've been watching recently? It can be non-fiction. It doesn't need to be fiction.
Can be non-fiction. The Freddie Flintoff's Field of Dreams.
Oh yeah.
Have you watched that?
I've not seen it, but
I've seen it around.
Yeah, it's just incredible. It's the second series. He's taken on a group of young lads from deprived backgrounds in Preston in the first series, and he's introduced them to cricket. And it's not really about cricket at all. It's about giving young people opportunities. It's about the struggles that young people face in this in the current society. And the second series, which was after his, it was part filmed before his accident that he had with Top Gear, and then it finished afterwards. He takes this group to India on tour, and again, it's not really about cricket. Cricket is the vehicle to tell about the cultural differences, the cultural, the mental health issues that the kids are going through. But he's going through. There's one lad who's an Afghan refugee who basically had to leave his family behind in Afghanistan and walked from Afghanistan to the UK through Italy, and he's 16. Wow. This lad, it's just the most heartrending story that I've heard of things that are going on in our life.
Yeah, brilliant.
On that cheery note.
Well, we always end the last end the podcast on the same last episodes. Which, Jesus, I can't get my words right. We always end the podcast on the same last questions. Super quick fire, either or, and there's no right answer here really, apart from perhaps one of them. But we'll start off with UK or US crime dramas.
UK.
TV or cinema?
TV.
Night owl or early bird?
Early bird. Definitely not be bored. Too many pictures of me asleep on the settee.
Music or no music when you're writing?
Music when I'm writing, no music when I'm editing.
Okay,
right. And the last one, paper book or ebook?
Paper book out of preference, ebook out of necessity, only because I've got an app that I can play ebooks through, so I can get through books quicker. But
Graham, that kind of feels that you're preference. It feels that you kind of given you're answering both there. If you had to pick one,
this is an important question to Tarek. You have to put your foot in one camp.
There's two loyal camps. Oh, okay, that's incorrect. I should have pushed it.
Yeah, you should have taken the win, Tarek. You should have taken the win.
You can edit it how you please.
Well, we'll cut it out exactly. Perfect. Thanks, Graham.
Well, thanks very much to Graham for coming on there. Controversial.
Who would have thought Line of Duty was unrealistic?
Exactly. It's a very popular TV, but like I say, it did get ridiculous, Line of Duty. So it doesn't surprise me that it's not particularly accurate.
Very much became 24, didn't it? I think that.
Yeah.
That kind of
when there was the shootout.
The shootout, exactly. When she's on the
interview room and all that sort of stuff.
Truck,
yeah, exactly.
Lining up her perfect shot down the street. Yeah, I remember thinking this is just nuts. Very enjoyable, but
it is enjoyable, but not the most accurate. Yeah. So, but Happy Valley being the most accurate,
and certainly I've watched all Happy Valley, and I do enjoy it, and it definitely feels like a very accurate description of it feels like the way people talk to each other and the kind of. I'm sure Graham says that the way they kind of stick their head in the office room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
the way they address each other, it does feel very accurate. Yeah.
Yeah, and interesting as well. Writing from the perspective of a sort of senior officer as the protagonist, because right enough that isn't something you see that often. It is, I guess, very easy to fall into that stereotype of the senior officer either being,
kind of grumpy.
Grumpy, yeah. Give me your badge.
Alcoholic.
Give me your badge and gun. I mean, that's American, but you know what I mean. Or either that, or incredibly corrupt, or something like that.
Yeah,
So I can see
I
why.
I actually watched. This is dreadful radio, but I actually watched a very good video on YouTube or Twitter of a guy doing an impression of like the kind of classic cop.
Oh yeah, I think I've
movies.
seen that video.
It's brilliant.
Yeah,
And it's every line he says, I'm like that. That is exactly. The press are gonna have a field day
Yeah,
over
that's right.
this.
Yeah.
The lines
I
that
did see
nobody ever says in real life, but are very much.
Sorry, my dog is barking in the background
Oh,
there. He obviously
loves that.
disagreed with what you were saying there.
His line of duty is actually quite an accurate portrayal of cops.
Exactly, yeah. He's a big Line of Duty fan. Chewie, quiet. But you can pick up City of Fire now. We'll put the link in the podcast description. But next week we're moving away from crime into the world of fantasy.
Epic romantic fantasy with Chloe Peñaranda, who is I think maybe our first big TikTok star, which is an area I think a lot of writers are really interested in knowing. Book talk, yeah. How do you get big on TikTok? Because it's becoming more and more of a massive game changer in terms of book sales, and only for certain genres. I think I know romantasy, fantasy, those books I think tend to do very well on TikTok. I think maybe sci-fi, crime less so, but it's certainly it's become a bit of a game changer, I think, for certain genres in the last few years.
Yeah, it's been huge, and Chloe is an author that obviously had self-pub success, and now he's moving into trad pub as well. So it's a really interesting journey, and as you say, it's very, very topical and relevant to a lot of people. You know, how do you use TikTok in particular, I guess, but any social media to boost your profile as an author and get new readers. So yeah, it's a great episode. So please do tune in for that one. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do take the time to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app, as that helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast. Also, please do tell other people about the podcast. Please get as many people as possible.
Please tell people.
No, exactly. But we want to grow it, and we are growing, and we've got a burgeoning, on YouTube, we're trying to put more video ones up. We've got the Drafting Notes podcast up there, the first episode, as I said. But also, we have our Patreon, I never know how to say it.
No.
Which you can sign up to. You get a very nice pin badge and bookmark just for signing up.
We just got the pins.
We just got
today,
the pins
actually.
in.
Yeah, they look very. I'm looking at them right now.
Soon.
Very nice.
But you also can sign up for higher tiers, get free books, free notebooks, access to exclusive podcasts like our Drafting Notes episodes and things like that. So please do check that out if you haven't already. You can also join our Discord, which you can do for free just by signing up for free on the Patreon, and chat to other listeners and authors on there as well. So there's many ways we're trying to improve this Page One product that we're offering you. So please do check that out if you haven't already.
And if you want to get in touch with us, there are a variety of ways to do so. Easiest of which is an email. Just fire off an email to podcast@rightgear.co.uk, or drop us a social media message. We're on all the social medias. Just search for @UK Page One and search for Page One podcast on YouTube.
We're not on TikTok.
We're not on TikTok.
Well, I have registered as on TikTok, but at the same time, I'm terrified.
TikTok is a strange beast, which we are going to have to tackle, because I feel
we should have asked Chloe about that. In fact,
we should have. That was a big mistake.
Learn from her.
Yeah, no, I feel like this is what my mum must be like when anything newfangled comes along, and I can feel myself becoming that old man already, and I'm like, I need to just stop that from happening. I'm going to get involved in stuff. So.
Exactly. But yeah, there are many ways to get in touch with us, so please do. We always value listener insight and suggestions as well. If you've got ideas for guests and things like that, then please do let us know. Yep. But otherwise, have a great week, and we will be back next week with another great episode.
See you later.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up button, and be sure to hit that subscribe button as well, so you never miss an episode like these ones below. And if you want to get in touch, you can always drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is @UK Page One, as evidenced here, and our other social media channels are available. Otherwise, we hope to see you next episode. See you later.